Welcome back, class. In this section, we are going to discuss children with disabilities in their education. We're also going to talk about education and the law in regards to children that have disabilities. We're going to first start off with understanding and learning what is a learning disability. A learning disability is just a fancy way to say that children have difficulty learning. The difficulty in learning can appear in issues with listening, thinking, reading, writing, and spelling. Boys are actually more likely to be referred for learning disabilities compared to girls. And so that is an example of a referral bias. A lot of times teachers just don't really know how to handle boys, and so they are referred more often to get tested for a learning disability compared to girls. The most common learning disabilities are dyslexia, and when children have dyslexia, that means that they are severely impaired in their ability to read and to spell. So they may actually see words and write letters backwards because they have issues with reading and spelling. There's another learning disability called dysgraphia, where you have difficulty with handwriting. So they may not have them fine motor skills to write. And so that's where dysgraphia would come in. And then you also have dyscalculia. And that is when children have difficulty with computing math. The exact cause of learning disabilities actually has not been determined, but there's a lot of research trying to understand where these learning disabilities occur and how they may come about differently and how they may show themselves differently in different children. Another disability or a disorder that children may have is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. When children consistently show one or more of inattention or hyperactivity or impulsivity, it can be one or all of these things over a period of time, then they're more likely to be diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. If there is no hyperactivity, it's important to note that it would just be attention deficit disorder. When you think about inattention, think about not being able to obviously pay attention. You may not be able to focus on one thing at a time. Hyperactivity is not being able to sit still to the point where it is influencing your day-to-day activities. And impulsivity is where you do things first and then you act later, or you think later. You do things first and then you think later. So not being able to think before you complete an activity. That would be an example of impulsivity. In the next slideshow, I actually have a video. I'll show this short video of a day in the life of someone with ADHD. I think it's a good example of how someone with ADHD may go about their life. I'll just show a couple minutes of it.
Bye, Mum.
Okay, bye, honey. Don't forget to get some milk. Oh, and we're having tea about 7. Don't be late.
Okay, so combining different shapes is easy. Triangles, circles, rectangles. Using the shape builder tool, you can collect all of those shapes together and make them into one big complex shape.
Mum's been so annoying lately. She's pestering me about staying in my room too much. I know, right? Just because they're not up to date with the world. Also, it's not like we spend all our time just talking on Facebook and whatever. We actually do.
Something interesting? If you can focus for the next half hour, if you can focus for the next half hour, if you can focus for the next half hour, if you can focus for the next half hour, if you can focus for the next half hour, if you can focus.
So that's just a short part of the video. If you want to continue to watch it, feel free to. It'll be in the lecture slides. But you can see that as he was going to school, he was paying attention to the trees and to the cars. But also when he got to school, he was still thinking about the trees. He wasn't too much being able to focus on what the student or what the teacher was saying, because he was focusing on the trees and also the trees that he saw on the way to school. And he was also focusing on the conversation. And as you can see, he wasn't paying attention, and the teacher noticed. And even after the teacher continues to teach, he's still thinking about what the teacher is saying, and asking when the teacher asks him to focus. So that's a good example, I think, of inattention in the ADHD, the inattention that could possibly be experienced when people have ADHD. Something that helps ADHD is mindfulness. So mindfulness is pretty much meditation, and you're teaching children how to meditate and how to pay attention to their breathing, to their body, and be able to meditate. There was actually a study of 11 and 15-year-olds that had ADHD, and they had 8 weeks of mindfulness training. And after the training, their attention improved, and they also improved in their behavior. So mindfulness, if you come across like maybe a student that has ADHD, it may be helpful to encourage them and teach them how to be mindful, to experience mindfulness. And that could be a possible solution that could help with ADHD. There are also emotional and behavioral disorders. Boys are actually 3 times as likely as girls to have these disorders. And emotional and behavioral disorders can include aggression, depression, fears associated with personal school matters, and things that may be inappropriate in regards to social emotional characteristics, such as not being able to share, not being able, again, to take the perspective of other people. That is an example of the emotional and behavioral disorders. There are a lot of them. If you ever just Google emotional and behavioral disorders, so many things will come up. There is also something called autism spectrum disorder, ASD. And when people are diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, they usually have problems with social interactions. And ASD, again, boys are more likely to be diagnosed with ASD. This is an example of a social disorder. They may also have issues with verbal and nonverbal communication. So in regards to verbal communication, they may not be able to communicate effectively, or they also may not be able to pick up on nonverbal cues. So they may continue to talk to someone, for example, and not be able to read the social cues that person is not interested in talking to them. So they just may talk and talk and talk and follow them all around. So that would be an example of an issue with nonverbal communication. They may also experience repetitive behaviors. I actually worked as a therapist with children that have autism, and there are a lot of repetitive behaviors that children may do. Children may twiddle their thumbs a lot, or they may yell out certain words. repetitive behavior, or they may have to walk maybe 7 times around the classroom before they go in. So that would be an example of a repetitive behavior. Next up, we're going to talk about education and the law. As you know, children can have various disabilities in the classroom, so it's important that the law actually the government actually has laws in regards to educating these students to make sure that they are able to learn in the best environments and be able to learn, get a chance to learn, just as people that are, neurotypical children are able to learn in the classrooms. So before the 1970s, the education system could actually refuse to educate children that were disabled. But in 1975, that was the Education for All Handicapped Individuals. And so that provided free, appropriate public education. In 2004, they came up with the Individuals with Disabilities Education Improvement Act. And that gave specific rules and regulations for children that had disabilities. Children had to be able to get a chance to be evaluated in order for their eligibility for different things that the school system can do for them in order to make sure that they're getting the best education that they can. And so an example of something that the school provides for children with disabilities is the individualized education program. That is where children are given specific guidelines teachers are given specific guidelines for educating that child based on what the child is able to do or not do because of their disability. Something else that came about because of education in the law is that children needed to be educated in the least restrictive environment possible. And when we say least restrictive environment, that means that they should be educated in a similar environment that is close to what other children that are neurotypical or may not have disorders are educated. So in thinking about least restrictive environment, you also have to include inclusion, which is where you educate a child with special educational needs full-time in the regular classroom. That may not work for every child. Again, it depends on what the child is able to do. But if a child is able to be educated in the regular classroom, if they have special educational needs, then that is where the child should be educated. Okay, that's all for this video. In the next video, we are going to talk about motivation, self-efficacy, and expectations. I'll see you all on the next video.